Nvidia is set to report fourth quarter earnings on Wednesday after the bell, and while the street expects it to deliver a solid beat on revenue and earnings, investors will be paying close attention when it comes to topics like supply and demand, forward guidance, the possibility of new tariffs, and the impact of China's DeepSeek. Joining us now, John Vinh, KeyBanc Capital Markets equity research analyst. John, a longtime Nvidia bull, I think it's safe to describe you as someone who has been reading your notes for a few years now on Nvidia. Let's take the DeepSeek part of this first. Let's just dive right into that, because you talk about that the demand for DeepSeek will cause demand for different types of chips from Nvidia. Why do you think, though, it won't hurt its main business?
So I think over the long term, I think the compute TAM, or the compute processing that's needed to train these, AI models, versus where we thought it was maybe a few months ago, that potentially TAM is going to be a little bit smaller, right? These optimizations that DeepSeek had introduced are likely going to be incorporated into some of these other AI models that Google and OpenAI are also developing. That for sure is likely going to happen. In the near term, DeepSeek is driving a surge in demand for these NVIDIA GPUs, these H20s that are China compliant by Chinese hyperscalers, because I think these hyperscalers recognize that it's possible for them to be able to train a lot of these AI models with lesser processing capabilities.
John, you just mentioned those hyperscalers. We just heard from them reporting their earnings results. Did you hear anything, John, from those big cloud giants that made you think they're spending as they build out AI infrastructure, as they spend on Jensen Huang's chips? Did you hear anything that signals or suggests, John, that spending is going to slow down in the near to intermediate term?
I don't see that happening anytime soon. The CapEx numbers have been really strong from all the major hyperscalers. I don't think anyone's kind of budging from, the CapEx intensity plans there. I think if you listen to kind of Sam Altman talk about it, he said, DeepSeek R1 is a very good model, but he kind of talked about it and saying, well, that addresses kind of a niche, maybe lower end segment of the market that's probably going to be used more widely within the China domestic market. But when you think about just globally, OpenAI and Google and Meta are going to develop AI models that are going to be much more comprehensive, addresses kind of high performance models, and they're going to require a significant amount of compute capabilities. So I don't see a let up at this point in time.
So John, when it comes to what we're going to hear from Nvidia, both the numbers and the forecast, where do you think the suspense lies? Is it going to be more about whether they are able to make as many chips as the market would like?
I think, like every earnings, right? The call is going to focus on the results and the guidance. I think the results are going to be very strong. NVIDIA has this cadence of just moderately guiding above consensus, and they're typically very conservative about that. But I think the focus on the call is really going to be around Jensen's commentary about DeepSeek, right? And I think he's going to come out and he's going to embrace DeepSeek, right? And he's going to say, DeepSeek is great for AI. It's expansive to the overall TAM, and it's not going to be, it's not going to kind of cut down on the opportunity that's ahead of us. And if you think about it, Jensen met with President Trump at the end of January. Coming out of that meeting, there was not a ban on China AI chip exports, as most people had feared. So it seems like, at least in the near to medium term, he's got the current administration on board with that sort of view.
John, I'm curious, what do your checks indicate right now about what supply and demand look like for Blackwell, their new chips?
I think supply is in a good position. I do think that there are some bottlenecks related to the ramp of NVIDIA's next generation Blackwell GB200 NVL platforms. These are the full server stack solutions that sell for $3.5 to $4 million. I think that's going through kind of a ramp up curve. There's some yield issues with that, but what we're hearing is that customers are able to pivot, and if they're not able to get these GB200 NVL server racks, they're able to pivot and order some of these more traditional server AI systems for Blackwell that are based on kind of the B200 chips. And then I think lastly, I do think that some of that yield and supply constraints is going to be backfilled by the strong demand and surge that we're seeing right now for these China compliant H20 chips as well.
John, what do you think the biggest risk is to NVIDIA right now?
I think the biggest risk to NVIDIA over the kind of the medium to longer term is whether how quickly these optimizations that DeepSeek has introduced make their ways into these kind of frontier AI models that are being developed by Meta, OpenAI, and Google, right? So if those optimizations get incorporated to these models, and that results in a significant reduction in the amount of compute intensity required to train these models, that could represent a source of risk to NVIDIA over the medium term.
Finally, we did want to ask you about Apple's new investment in, U.S. jobs and U.S. manufacturing, and just sort of the implications of this move and some of the other moves that we've been seeing to bring some of these operations to the U.S. As part of this, Apple's going to buy some more chips. It's already been planning to. Going to buy more chips from the TSMC plant in the United States. How are you thinking about the implications of all this for the chip industry in the U.S.?
I think it's great. I think there's a few things that are driving that, right? Apple seems like they're behind on the Apple Intelligence race. We also kind of do a lot of surveys on a monthly basis on iPhone demand, and right now from our surveys, Apple Intelligence is a complete non-factor in terms of driving demand for iPhones. And that's pretty disappointing, right? Because we've been bullish around the long-term opportunity around edge AI, but I don't see that driving any sort of demand right now. And I think Apple recognizes this. So they are obviously being forced and aggressively investing into their AI infrastructure, right? And I think the goal of that investment is to drive a differentiated AI strategy for them to develop compelling AI applications in these iPhones going forward, and to drive traction in Apple Intelligence.
John, always great to see you and to have you on the show. Thank you, sir.
Great, thank you.